All right, recordings in progress. Welcome to PE Turned RE, where we help everyday people build wealth through real estate. Today, I have a really special guest on, actually, the first guest that's going to be touching this topic. So I'm really excited to get the information to you. We met at a WARE event. Today, I have Mekias on from Seattle.
Hello, hello. How's it going?
Good. Thank you for being on here, brother. So we had met at a WARE event. That's the Washington Real Estate Investing Group. Before we get started, I want to kind of shout them out. We've met there a couple times. Can you tell the people what value that you get from that group?
Totally, yeah. I think, Wari is a great community of people that are going in the same direction within, trying to build wealth, freedom, opportunity for themselves within real estate. And so it's great to be in that room. It's a group of investors in the greater Seattle, Tacoma area. And, they have a bunch of resources online through like the Facebook groups, but then also they have in-person meetups as well. And that's where we got to connect, and I've got to connect with a ton of other people.
Yeah, for anyone that's in the Washington area, we always meet the last Wednesday of each month in Bellevue. You're free to contact me and I'll send you the info. It is a ticketed event, so it's not just when we can just show up. Um, Last month we had 70 to 80 people there. It was a packed house. Yeah, but
Gotta
I didn't have you on to talk about Wari. I wanted to have you on to talk about your story. So let's just tell people with where your current where your portfolio is at now.
Yeah, currently, I'm still kind of early in my real estate investing journey, I would say. Right now, I own two properties in the Seattle city of Seattle, and I'm building two more right now. And so in about a couple of months, I'll be at four total properties. I have one property that I use as a long-term rental. So it started off as a house hack, lived in it, I fixed it up, and I rent out two separate units within that house now, and that's kind of fully long-term rented. And then I have my current property here, which I also I'm house hacking, so I fully renovated this one, living in the top unit and then renting out the basement as well. And then on top of that, I'm currently in under construction for building two detached ADUs on the same lot as well. So about four total properties once we wrap that one up.
Nice. Okay. So we've had house hackers beyond that. That's kind of my main thing that I try to get people understand that it's such a huge way to start off. But I haven't had a person with the DADU experience on yet. So we'll kind of dig into that aspect of it here soon. But so you had said you bought the first one, but can you take us back a little bit to like what started everything? Because you're a young guy. How did you even get started in the game?
Yeah, I think, growing up, I've always had some sort of an interest for real estate. You watch like HGTV and all these people kind of fixing things up. So I've always like had an interest in it, but I didn't know necessarily like if that's something for me. But I went to college, got my degree in business. And while I was in college, actually, one of the kind of light bulb moments for me was we were renting a house near the UW Seattle campus, and it was like me and a bunch of my friends, and we had to put a ton of money per rent, all of us combined, to rent that place out. And so in the back of my mind, I'm like, obviously we have to do this, but like, how could somebody, be making this much money? Like, what is going on here? It didn't really make sense to me. So that kind of piqued my interest. But as I got into kind of the workforce, graduated college in 2020, I started learning more about real estate through Bigger Pockets, through just all of the different online kind of resources. And at that time, too, I think real estate was just kind of starting to explode with kind of the pandemic and the low interest rates. So I kind of just sat back those first couple of years from like 2020 to 2022, 23, just to like observe while I'm saving money, while I'm, building my own kind of just capital myself and entering the workforce. And I got to learn a lot just from other people, going to a ton of meetups, things of that nature. And then that kind of propelled me to purchasing the first property in the end of 2023. And at that time, I knew a couple of different things that I wanted to do. Number one, through all the kind of learning that I did over the last couple of years, I knew I wanted to buy something that was value add because that was kind of where I could make a little bit more profit and recycle my money, kind of taking advantage of the Burr method as well. So that property checked that box off. The second thing that I wanted to also make sure that the property did was house hack because at the end of the day, I'm still getting started. I don't want to take on, a $4,000 mortgage or whatever the case may be, especially with the interest rates, climbing. So I wanted to find something that was had the potential to be rented out, whether that's, part of the house or ideally for me, fully separate, basement situation. So
I was like a
that
split.
house, yeah, split level, like the upstairs I rented out and then the basement, or the upstairs I lived in and then the basement I rented out. So it checked that box off. And then the third thing at that time in 2023, you really started hearing more about detached ADUs, DADUs. Everybody was talking about it in Seattle. It was kind of picking up steam. So I didn't know much about it, but I knew what type of lot you needed to build one. So I was like, okay, I might not be ready to build one, but I just want to buy a property that I know maybe later down the line when I do have a little bit more money, the time, the education about it, that I could build it. So that property also checked that box off. And so those are kind of the three buckets that I was looking at. And, thankfully, it checked all the boxes. We tech probably after I purchased it, maybe like 4 or 5 months just fixing it up. It definitely needed a ton of work. But I learned a ton through that experience, both, getting my hands dirty on how to actually like do construction and learn a little bit, but then also like how to manage finances, how to manage a construction budget, contractors, like all that sort of thing. So it was a really good kind of turning on point for the rest of my real estate career.
Good, good. So, I kind of want to go back. You had mentioned the college thing, right? All of you friends kind of pulled cash and then you sent it to the like the landlord. Well,
Yeah.
that's very interesting how that sparked your mind because that also sparked mine. Because when I was
Oh,
young,
really?
we didn't pool all of our money and send it to the landlord. We each like would Venmo him,
Mm.
but he didn't have his Venmo private. So
Oh,
we would all see like, oh, so and so paid him. Oh, so and so paid him. Oh, so like you would see this laundry list of like $700, $800. You're like, holy smokes, how much money is this guy making? There's eight of us in this house, plus he owns other houses. So it's like, oh my gosh.
wow. Yeah, it's crazy. Even for us, like that house that we rented out, it was like it was beat, it was not, it was like almost like slumlord level, but the location was like you couldn't beat it. It was
Hmm.
right across the street from campus. And the rent that we were paying at that time, which was like 2018, was like $10,000 a month. And I was like, wow. And I looked back, I went on Zillow, I looked back, I was like, how much did this person buy this property for? And he
Mhm.
bought it for like, man, like 500,000 or something, like way back in like 2000 or the late 90s. And I was like, man, like he bought this property for, a few $100,000, held on to it, barely making any repairs, but obviously bought in the right location.
Yeah.
And he's just collecting cash flow, ever since then. So yeah, it's interesting that you had the same experience. I feel like a lot of people probably did if we asked them to.
Yeah, and mine was also a beater up house. I remember I moved into to one of the houses and he had to replace the fridge. That is one thing that he fixed, right? Like we have to have
Mm.
a refrigerator.
Yeah.
But the refrigerator he bought was too big, so he had to take out part of the like this overhang of the wall
Wow.
to get the refrigerated. But he never fixed it. So we just had this hole in our wall.
God. Oh man, that's crazy.
All right, so you figure out, hey, I'm going to do this house hacking thing. I'm going to get the split level so that way I can at least rent a piece out. In your top area, did you also rent that area out to like a roommate, or did you just say, hey, I'm done with the roommates? I had that in college.
Yeah, definitely wanted to be done with the roommates, I think, after the 10-bedroom situation. But it was me and my partner at that time. So like we wanted something where like we could have our own space. We're working from home as well. So we kept the upstairs to ourselves, and that was a 3-bed, 1 bath. And then the basement we rented out, and that was a 2-bed, 2 bath.
Okay. I'm not going to make you share your full numbers here, but what was your payment when you were house
Yeah,
hacking compared to if you were to rent the same
totally.
type of unit? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the payment that we had was about a little over $2,000 per month that we just me and my partner upstairs that we'd pay, and the total mortgage was about $5,000. So about half was being covered by the mortgage or the rent on the bottom. And then
Okay.
if I was to rent, I mean, I rented 2 years before that. And in that apartment, we moved out because the rent was going to increase to $3,000. And that's $3,000 on a one bedroom, 650 square feet. Then you're going to pay for parking and all of this stuff. So, like, it made infinite sense to house hack and get my own place, build equity, and pay less every single month.
Yeah, wow. $1,000 swing is definitely good for you guys to save some money, plus all the parking fees and all the extra stuff.
Yeah,
Nice.
totally.
Okay. So you get the first one. You know you're not really prepared to do the DADU. To me, that sounds like a whole new world, right? So then
Yeah.
what sparks the next purchase?
Yeah. So after I bought that house, fixed it up, rented it out, I think I really caught the real estate bug at that time because I was like, okay, like I've proved to myself that I could do this. Now let me map out a plan of like what is next and like what I actually want to do with this long term because I put my foot in the water a little bit. I liked it. Now it's time to go all in. And so from that point on, I started really thinking about, okay, like what is the timeline of like how long I want to be, in the workforce? How long do I want to, when do I want to retire? Thinking about kids, like real long-term goal. And I realized that, okay, like I really need to be a little bit more aggressive early on. And while I'm young, while I have, not as many responsibilities, not as many kids. And so I started really diving into the DADU strategy just because at that time, it was really, at least in Seattle, like the best way to make cash flow, to get that 1% rule, which is almost impossible in the city of Seattle, to build something that is new development and, you don't have to have as many headaches. And the numbers really, really made sense as I like really started diving into it. So, about like a year or so after, towards the end of 2024, I decided like, okay, the next property has to be like prime DADU potential. Like that is the number one thing I'm looking for. Like if I can house hack it, great. If I can live in it, fix it up, great. But like the number one goal started becoming the DADU play. And so that is where started looking around again. And then I came up off the second property, which was on market and it was sitting on about an almost 12,000 square foot lot, corner lot in, the city of Seattle, which is pretty rare. And so that's kind of how the mindset came from like thinking about it and the goal and all the way to like the purchase of that second one.
Nice, nice. All right. So we kind of get the story, we kind of get the timeline now. We're kind of like look down a little bit, right? So let's first talk about that first property, right? You got the people underneath you. You're now the landlord that's collecting the Venmo checks or whatever. What was that like to go from renter to landlord?
Yeah, it's kind of a mindset shift. I would say that's the biggest thing because when you're renting, at the end of the day, there is a landlord there. If something goes wrong, they'll take care of it. It's much less just stress and pressure because at the end of the day, like once you make your payment, you're good to go. But at the same time, there's obviously a lot of downsides to that from a financial point of view. For me, once I became the landlord, I really started to learn really quickly that this is a business at the end of the day. It's not just something where like, it's like pa super passive and you just like throw it to the side and you never worry about it again. Like you do have to be actively somewhat involved, especially if you're living on site. And so the biggest thing for me was setting up my systems and my tools. So, like, what is the property management software that I'm going to use? How do I write a lease? Like, what needs to go in a lease? What needs to go in a lease for a house hack? What are the rules of like, hey, I'm bringing people in to, even though everything is completely separate, at the end of the day, like, there are times where like we'll be interacting with each other, whether it's outside, whether it's the mail and stuff like that. So, like, I started thinking about like all of those different scenarios and figuring out how to put as much of the stuff on paper as I can so
Mm.
that once we bring somebody in, we all are fully clear on like what the expectations are and there's not as many surprises. And so that was like the biggest thing for me prior to bringing a renter in. And then even like listing the property, what is the description, how do you take the photos, what is some, even understanding about like the market and the neighborhood specifically, like what kind of a target audience am I going for with this type of rental compared to like, a fully done home that has a big yard and like a bunch of space. It's, different people. And so really trying to understand as much of that as possible helped me make that transition into being a landlord much, much easier. And then as kind of, people moved in and, we got to like really go through it, figuring out like what are the different things that people encounter as your tenants? What are the different things that might come up? And whether it's an electrician that needs to come in and, fix something, whether it's a light that's out or a carbon monoxide alarm or like all these little things that like, as a renter, your landlord would take care of. It became the reverse for me. And so really trying to get good at like building systems, understanding what I can repeat, what who my people are. At the end of the day, like it's a people business. Like, you're a landlord, but at the end of the day, you're providing housing to another individual. And so taking that as well as with a utmost of privilege and making sure that like you're providing that service because, when I was in college, definitely wasn't getting that service. So yeah, that's kind of I would say the difference, some of the differences that I've noticed.
Good. Yeah, and Seattle's a tough one to landlord, and you really got to know everything, rules, guidelines, all that in and out stuff, because their handbook is fat.
Yeah, I mean, I'm learning stuff every day. I feel like now, like there's new things that get into effect with the law, and so you definitely have to be as aware as you can be.
Good. Is there a story of like the oh shit, I'm a landlord now, like I got to figure this thing out?
Let me see. I feel like
It's been all good so far?
I mean, things come up. Nothing like major or
Okay.
bad, I would say. But like not even funny, but like the like aha moment, I feel like was so like the first property, we fully fixed it up. Like full renovation, everything is new. So I was like, okay, hopefully like nothing, breaks or happens. But maybe I think it was like 5 months in or something, they called me and they're like, "Hey, the toilet isn't working." And so like obviously I went there and I fixed it. It wasn't really that like difficult of a fix, but in my mind I was like, "Oh wow, like this is like what people talk about, like the toilet is broken or whatever, or you get that call." Luckily, it wasn't in the middle of the night or anything like that, but I would say like that was probably the one moment I remember.
Nice. Yeah, I think in our minds, when that text comes through, the call comes through, our mind goes to the worst possible thing, like, oh
Mhm.
no, the toilet's overflowing, it's flooding, I'm gonna have to do all this. But really, at the end of the day, it was probably just a couple things that you had to do, and boom, it was fixed.
Totally. Yeah, it wasn't that bad. But as you're going through, especially the first few times, I feel like you're always like, what's the worst case scenario? But you get used to it. Yeah.
Yeah, I chose to replace the hot water tank on my own because I'm like, oh, this isn't that hard, right? And so like I think it's like I do it all. And I'm like, okay, sweet, it's good. And then I get home, like, and I like, oh no, like 30 minutes later, and then they call me, and I'm like, oh my God, what did I mess up? Is something like flooding? Like, what went wrong, right? I literally didn't turn the valve back on, so they had no
Um,
water. So, like, I was panicking, but really, I just needed to go turn the valve back on. I just missed
that
that one.
last step, just the last step.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So no, I think especially as newer like landlords, our mind goes to that worst case, but oftentimes it's really not.
Yeah.
Cool.
Totally.
So I feel like most people can understand the up-down house hack. That's awesome.
Yeah.
But tell me about this DADU play because you're in the process of building two of them. Kind of what are the advantages? Why did that kind of spark your mind? Um, because because it is becoming much more popular, but why?
Yeah. I think, initially, like when you look at a city like Seattle, housing is very, very expensive. So the law and the government in the city and, throughout the state even now wants to figure out how can we build more housing in the places that people want to be at a very affordable cost. And that's kind of the reason behind these DADUs and ADU plays. And so for me, I really, number one, that mission and that goal aligned with like my values. I also grew up super, in low income housing. I, saw my parents struggle. So I really enjoy just the mission of it, number one. But then, as you get into like the business side of it, it's definitely something that is rare, I would say, because we have an opportunity here to, at least in Seattle, I'm going to speak just from a Seattle point of view, where the cost of construction to build these detached ADUs is anywhere from 300,000 to 450,000 or so. So it's about in that range. But you can also go ahead and rent these out long term for 3,000, sometimes upwards of 4,200. And so it meets that 1% rule, which is very rare in expensive cities. And then at the same time, if you go out and sell these, you can sell a detached ADU in a decent neighborhood of Seattle from 750,000 all the way up to 850,000. Sometimes you'll even see them over $1 million. And so you really see kind of the margin and the spread of it is also vast as well. And so it all kind of matches as far as like you're getting great appreciation and you're forcing value, you get good cash flow, the cost of construction is good, and all of that good stuff. And so that's kind of the strategy high level behind it. And then, in Seattle, you also have these sorts of lots and single family properties that are on alleys, that are on corner lots, or like the house might be pushed to one side and you could put a driveway right behind it to get to the house in the back. So the properties and the lots themselves lend themselves well to having additional dwelling units kind of built on them. So that's kind of the where I would at least like high level go about it. But I'm happy to like dive in like to any specific part of it because I'm like in it 24/7, I feel like now.
Good. No, no, I think that high level view was awesome. And it really makes sense that you gravitated towards it because you have that business background of understanding, okay, this is the cost basis, this is the spread, right?
Yeah.
And you're a numbers guy. It makes sense. But I'm curious though, have you had any construction background?
Good question. No, no. That is honestly the biggest learning curve for me is the construction background. And that's good that you bring that up because I think everybody comes into this real estate game with like their own background. You might be strong at one thing, but you might not be strong in another. And so for me, that's one thing that I really had to learn real fast. And that was where a ton of the online resources, fixing that first house up as well, and really being hands-on really helped. And even now I'm learning so much new things every single day. And I think the biggest thing is like, search for resources, whether it's your community, which is very big and helpful for me. Like I'm a part of mentorship groups and I have a community of, contractors and investors and people that have done it before that I can lean on. And then there's so much resources outside, like online now that like the information is out there, but you just have to be willing to go out there and learn it and figure out what your weak spots are and try to strengthen those.
All right, well, since you said that, I kind of have to put you on the spot now. What are some
Yeah.
of the resources that people can go to?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing right now, if you just do a basic YouTube search and like search up like ADU, DADU content, like there's gonna be a ton of stuff out there. So like that's like the easiest, I feel like, way to like start getting into it. And there's a ton of like creators, content creators as well, investors in the city that you're in that have probably like thought about doing it or have talked about it. And so like those are the easiest ways. And then as you feel like you want to learn more about it, the biggest thing I would say is like mentorship groups are really big. So like I'm a part of Springboard, which is Thatch's mentorship group, and like he's does so many of these projects. So like being in those groups or even WARI, like places where like there's conferences and there's meetups and even free events where like people are in the same room. I think that's like the biggest help that I've got is like the resources of the people. And then now, I mean, like it's kind of funny to say, but AI, like ChatGPT, like all these tools, like don't take the advice 100%, but like it is a good place to just like jot out some questions, some random things that you have, and like try to get an idea of like what it is. And so I would say those are like the three buckets that I would probably focus on if you're trying to get resources and help.
Nice. Yeah, I think mentorship is huge. Like you pay for yours through the Springboard to Wealth program with Thatch, but there's also you can make people your mentor without them even knowing because of all the stuff on YouTube, right? Like I'm not sure if you know Derek, that ADU guy.
I think I've seen him yeah, a couple of his videos. Yeah.
Yeah, so he's based out of Portland or I know it's Oregon,
Yeah.
right? But like he literally gives people the breakdown of every project, the materials that he used, the cost of material, the permits that he had to pull, and so I'm just like he's giving away the game for free,
For
people.
free.
You
It's
might as well
there.
go watch it. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely I think like nowadays we're in the information age. So like honestly, it's too much information out there. So sometimes you also have to be smart with like who you're getting that information from.
Mhm.
But like I don't think there's no more excuses of like, the information is not out there. It's all out there now.
Oh yeah, okay. Like back in the day, our parents and our grandparents, yeah, okay, they had to go to the library, they had to know a
Yeah.
guy, right? Now you just type it, you say it into your phone. You don't even have to type it.
Yeah. Yep,
Oh, geez.
exactly.
Okay. So you kind of get this confidence through the first house hack to kind of do a little bit of the construction, and then you're trying to be around people that have done the ground up. You said you're not quite done with the two projects yet, but can you just give us an update on kind of how you thought they were about to go, how they actually are going, and kind of the timeline?
Yeah, so this second property, we fixed up the main house and we also did the split level situation. So that part was a little bit more easier for me just because I've already just done it, a couple years ago. The construction part, what was interesting was like the first thing is like you need to build a good team of trades because you have to get permits. And to get permits in most major cities, you have to have a good architect. You have to have a structural engineer. You have to have a survey company. And so like luckily for me, I got really good recommendations of like people to hire, but I started building out kind of my own team per se.
Mhm.
Um, and so I tried my best to like input the best people that I can. And throughout the process, I started learning, okay, like this person I hired, amazing. Like I will always use this person as my X, Y, and Z. But then this company that I hired for this other part, is delaying me, is not giving me responses. And so for me, it was really like, since it was my first time, really assessing my team that I built up and who I want to keep moving forward and who I want to, look for new talent elsewhere. And so that was like the biggest learning curve for me because it went from more so dealing with like contractors and like people and handyman and plumbers and that sort of thing to like
Mhm.
actual people that are like more so behind the screen and computer and like helping you submit permits and designing the builds and landscape architects and all these different people like traffic studies. I didn't even know what a traffic study was, but like, that's one of the things that I had to go through is like, okay, if you're going to build a house here and they're going to be backing up onto the street, we need to make sure that like the amount of cars that are flowing through this area allow it for it to be safe to have somebody back up. Otherwise, you're going to have to build a roundabout. And there's all these little like, there's so many different nuances that like honestly, like nobody will understand until they go through it a lot of times. And so the biggest thing is like having a really good team of people that like have done it before that you can trust. So kind of got through that. We started submitting for our permits, I think, or like kind of kicking that process off somewhere in the summertime, probably like July, I would say. And then from July all the way through September, October, we submitted our permits, and then there's revisions. And, the city's going to come back to you with like, okay, you submitted all of these things based off of our requirements, but, you need to change this. You need to go change that. You need to change this, specify what you're doing here. So there's like these corrections that you go through, and like there's a first round of corrections, and you go back to your trades that you hired before, and you're like, hey, you guys got to fix some of this stuff, and then you go through your second round, and luckily, we got through all of that, and we're able to get permits probably sometime in December, I believe. That's when we were able to get permits. So it took about like a little bit less than 6 months. And then from there, at that same time, I was also kind of assessing like who I want to actually build these things because like, you need a really good builder. I think that's the other part of it. It's like first you got the permits and the design and everything ready to go, but then whoever is actually going to go execute that can make or break your project, similar to like a renovation as well, because they could make a contractor can make or break your project. And so luckily for me, I have a really good builder, very trusted person, somebody I have a really good relationship with, both, with real estate and even outside of real estate. And so got them into the loop as well, went through like the budget of like what I'm thinking, where they would be at, found a really good line, kind of middle ground, talked as specific as we can. Again, back to like the point around like trying to set everything up early so that expectations are as clear as possible so that there's no surprises up front. I've done that, across all of these things, especially for this new build as well, trying to be as specific as possible. And we broke ground about a couple of weeks ago now. And so now we're like excavated, demoed everything. The site is clear. We've, dug all the way in and we're going to start pouring foundation tomorrow. So
Oh, nice.
hopefully it's going to be ready by hopefully, sometime in the summer is what we're predicting.
Exciting, exciting. Yeah. With my teaching background, I definitely understand that whole front load the expectation, right? Tell
Yeah.
them exactly with what you need them to do, what's going to happen, and what's going to happen if it doesn't happen, right? Like you got to have all the variables there. I think it's easier when you know what you're doing, you've done it before. I'm sure the first time you're like, okay, what do I like? You don't know what you don't know.
Uh-huh.
Like I
100%.
yeah, like I know I'm missing something. I don't know what that something is. And so, but that's awesome that you have such a great team around you. If people don't know a builder, right? And you said you had a personal relationship. What's a way a person could vet a builder or someone else on their team?
That's a really good question. For the builder one, I could give a couple like different specific examples. Like the first one is like go see what other projects they're currently doing or have done. That is like your number one like, source of reference. And also talk to those investors or the people that they built for. Because, as best as like you can try to predict a future, partnership with somebody, looking backwards, I think is the best kind of evidence that you have. So go to the sites, walk them. How are they keeping their construction site? Or is it clean? Is it super messy? Are there people on site drinking beers and having a good time? Or, are people actually like getting stuff done? I feel like that's like the easiest and best way that you could do it. So like that's one thing. And that's honestly for anything, like past references for like architects, past references for like all these different people that you need to hire, I think is like the number one resource or way that you can really understand how somebody would perform. And then the other thing is like finding people is honestly back to the meetups. Like when you go to these meetups and you get around these, people, you'll meet builders, you'll meet other investors that have hired builders. You'll just make so many connections there that, you take their number down, you maybe set up time to do a quick coffee chat with them or maybe a quick phone call, you maybe visit their projects and see what they're doing. And so it kind of, as you build those relationships and put yourself out there, you can find a lot of these tradespeople. And that's probably the second biggest thing I would say.
Nice, nice. And so there's a lot of moving parts when you're doing this data. You had mentioned a traffic study, which I don't even know if people even know what that was until you broke it down. So thank you for doing so.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, what is that?
Yeah.
So you got traffic studies, you got permits, you got designing, you got foundation about to go down, right?
Yeah.
But you have a W-2 job.
Hmm. Yeah.
How does a normal person handle all of this?
Yeah. I think this is probably the part that I am really probably needing to like improve now is because for me, I'm starting to realize you need to have systems in place. You need to have like processes. And it's hard your first time because to your point earlier, like when you're doing something for the first time, you don't know what you don't know. So like you're just going through the flow, figuring it out. But as I move forward in kind of this real estate journey, building out those processes, building out those systems, building out the team, setting up the expectation, getting everything in writing, like all of that stuff will save you so much time as you're going through the process. That way, you know that, like, okay, during my 9 to 5, I'm just going to focus on this. And if I need to work more during my 9 to 5, that's fine because I have the foundation of this entire business sort of set up. And of course, you need to make yourself available when things come up. Things will always come up. They will always come up for sure. But you can minimize that as much as possible by creating really good systems and processes and documenting everything as best as possible. So that's kind of like long term, definitely like the second learning for me as I'm going through this project. But sometimes it also takes a little bit of grit, I feel like, when you're trying to do something like this, you can't expect it to be easy. If it was easy, everybody would do it. And unfortunately, it isn't. And so you got to have that expectation of saying, hey, my first time, my second time doing this, it will be a little bit hard, but the key is learning, is like learning from the mistakes, learning from what went well, what didn't go well. And for me, I'm also like, very schedule oriented now. Like, I'm trying to make sure that like from the moment I wake up, I have dedicated blocks for every single part of my life. I'm big into fitness. So like I wake up 5 a.m. every morning, go work out. That's my time for that. I want to make sure I'm taking care of that. Then, my work block, I'm super focused in on that, making sure that like I'm taking care of every single thing that I need to take care of during my 9 to 5. And then during, post work or weekends or other times, I also, because I enjoy it, I can also like start focusing more on my business and like where how that's progressing. And luckily now I'm at a point where I don't have to be as involved in the day to day. Just coming in and making sure that like the big things are knocked out is my goal.
That and that's awesome. So you said the plan is the DADUs to get done during the summer. They're hopefully play the tenants are placed hopefully by July, August time, right? Just depends on with when it gets done.
Yeah.
So what is the next step, right? The DADUs are completed. We're all celebrating you. What is the next step after that?
Yeah, the next step for me, I think now is I understand the development side. I understand the long-term rental side. I understand the fix and hold side. Now I think it's really trying to make a full business out of this. And so what I'm trying to be doing moving forward is really figuring out, where I'm going to get my capital from, number one, both whether it's myself and my own capital, which is kind of how it's been up until this point, or also kind of opening up towards like more partnership opportunities because like now I want to scale this thing. I don't want to just be doing one project and maybe doing another one a couple years later. I really, especially now that I have my system set up, I really want to start scaling in a way that like I could do a couple different projects at a time. And so that's kind of the next step that I see for myself. Once these projects the current ones are done, definitely figuring out who that team is again, reassessing my team, plugging in and playing, who I want to keep, who I want to move on from, and then really scaling it. And then eventually, I think this strategy is probably going to be a mix of fix and hold and build and hold, and then also a little bit of flipping as well, because there's a lot of good deals that I've had to pass up on because they didn't make sense as fix and holds. They didn't make sense from a long-term rent point of view, but they would have been a killer flip. And so I definitely want to make sure that like I'm balancing both out because one is going to be building active income as well. And then if you can build that active income through flips and then put that money into some of your long-term holds, and you're just getting the best of both worlds. So that's where I want to kind of get to.
Nice. And I think one key point that we haven't talked about, and I think if we don't talk about it, people will be upset, is how does the financing for all this work, right?
Yeah.
So obviously for the owner occupied, we talked a lot about that on the channel that you only need 3.5% down for the first one, typically 5% down for any more after that. But how does the DADU financing work?
Yeah. So, in the city of Seattle, and I think in the state of Washington, the way it works is number one, you can finance them yourself. If you have $350,000 or whatever the cost of construction is,
Mhm.
by all means, go pay for that all cash and you're good to go. The second way is like if you draw out a home equity line of credit or some sort of line of credit, you could do that as well. obviously like make sure that you have some sort of a plan to pay that back. Don't just take it out and just leave it out. Ideally, you have some sort of plan there. The other way, and what I'm doing is actually through a hard money construction loan. So there is a couple different lenders out there, specifically here in Seattle, but then also I'm pretty sure like, in other states and cities as well. And essentially the way it's set up here is that if you have the plans, the permits, kind of everything set up, ready to go, and you also condoize. Condoize is essentially the way in Seattle where we split the homes and have them have their own separate parcel IDs, tax numbers, everything is separate. If you have all of that in place, then you would go to a hard money construction lender. Happy to share some recommendations if you guys need some. But you go to them and you're like, hey, like this plot of land here is owned free and clear. I have the permits, I have everything ready to go. I would like to have a construction loan to go out and carry out the build. And a lot of times they can do it for little to no money down at all. And it's a short-term loan, of course, it's 6, 12 months, however long you need it to build. And then from there, once you're done building, obviously there's interest only payments. The interest rate is a little bit higher compared to conventional mortgage, but at the end of the day, like you're only holding it for like 6 months or however long you need it. But once you're done with that, then you can either refinance into a 30-year fixed loan, either conventional or a DSCR loan. Or if you're going to flip it, then you just sell it off and then pay that loan back. So that's kind of high level how the financing works.
Nice. So you had mentioned before you go to the hard money lender, you condoized it,
Mhm.
and you've got the permits, and you've got the design already done, right? So I'm guessing at that point, that's your own capital that you have to use.
Correct. Yeah, that is kind of your out-of-pocket investment. And that's why the hard money construction lenders will credit you for
Mm,
that work that you did, because that would cost, at least for me on average, about 25 to $30,000 per unit.
mhm.
So that's kind of sort of like your down payment for that construction loan.
Okay. Yeah, I really don't think that's that bad in the grand scheme of things. So you're building for 400K about, right? And it's going to
Yeah.
be worth 700 to $1 million depending on what part of like Seattle you're in. I think that's a pretty fair amount to put down
Oh
for all
yeah.
the paperwork things.
Totally, yeah. That's where like you start seeing the true value of the strategies. Like the amount that you're putting in, yes, like there are like a big learning curve of like learning what it is. But once you understand it, it's like I'm putting this small amount down to get access and leverage to be able to build something for 400K. And essentially, when you think about it, it's like, okay, like I put kind of $60,000 down for permits, plans, everything for two units, two DADUs. And I'm getting access to this loan and I'm putting, some interest payments, call it 60, maybe like 80K, let's just say with everything.
Sure.
But you're getting an asset built at the end that is worth 700, 800,000 dollars. Like that shows you just how you can exponentially grow your money and your wealth through the strategy. So yeah, it's a great way to go.
That is awesome. Yeah, I think that's why Thatch really hones on it because it's literally a springboard to wealth if you do it right.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, it's in the name itself. So yeah.
So we hit the funding. Is there anything else that you think that people should know about your strategy?
I think for me, like the only other thing is like, as an investor, and especially if you're doing new construction or if you're flipping something, one thing that I'm really, I focus in on is like the design and the flow and the livability of the space. Because at the end of the day, like if you're building something and you're just thinking only about the numbers, then you're going to actually miss the mark on like making sure that the product is actually as good as it can be within the constraints of like the budget. And so like that's one thing that I really focus in on is like understanding like what are good materials for long-term rentals that still look good and that are still attractive to like, tenants, but also are durable and also are affordable. Same thing with like the fix and flip side. It's like the materials that you use on a fix and hold might be a little bit different from a fix and flip because you might go a little bit higher end. You need to understand like your neighborhood, your demographic, your buyer. And so I would say like one thing that I really focus in on is that. And I think a lot of other investors, will get a lot more out of their investment if they can kind of focus in on making sure the product serves the audience that it's meant to serve.
Wow, yeah, that is simple but not easy, I would say, is to know all of that stuff. Like to know flooring. Okay, it's just flooring, but there's so much to it, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, there's LVP, but then there's the wear layer, right?
Mhm.
There's all these things to these basic ideas that we have, but there's a lot there, and you're really sh showing and, highlighting the knowledge that you've gained. So that's awesome, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, it's like the more you peel back, the more you can find out. And so I think, you got to stay curious as well and, open-minded. But yeah, that's kind of the way it goes now. So
Good.
yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on to the channel. If people have more questions for you, is there a way for them to reach out to you?
Yeah, I would say Instagram is probably the best way. You can search me up, Mekias Bekalu, Mekias Bekalu. I think my Instagram at is meek.bekalu, Meek Bekalu. So like feel free to reach out there. I'm happy to chat with folks, grab some time, whatever the case may be. And yeah, go from there.
Perfect. Thank you. For folks, I'll also put that in the description of the video too. It'll be linked there. Make sure we hit them up. To the audience, if you found value in this conversation, please make sure you like and subscribe. We'll have another episode dropping next week. Thank you, man.
All right, appreciate it.